Ready?
I knocked your bag over.
Thank you. I don't think we're gonna need this. This is your water, Julie, correct?
That's not mine.
It's not yours? Is this yours?
No, I don't think
It's not mine either, but I'll drink it because I'm just that kind of girl. Okay. Is that Thomas? Is it? Okay. You guys ready? All right, we're ready, Thomas. Thank you. Good evening. We will call the meeting of the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee to order at 7:01. First order of business is that we are being recorded by HWCAM tonight, so just be aware that you are being recorded. And we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag for the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Fantastic. We have a lovely number of people in the audience tonight, so this would be your opportunity if you would come just to make citizens' comments. Great. If you can come to the mic and just state your name for the record and your address or town that you live in.
Hi, I'm Christine Lee. I live at 165 Cherry Street in Wenham, and I would just like to say that it's very important to me that we continue to have the SRO in schools for the health and safety of our children, for the well-being and safety of our children. I have two that are in the district currently, and I just hope that we hold on to the position as far as a local officer rather than a state trooper, which we would be legally bound to have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I didn't say this before. You are limited to 3 minutes. If you happen to decide you want to speak longer than that, let us know.
Keep it short, but cut me off if you need to. My name's Tom Starr, 41 Pleasant Street. I just wanted to say that I appreciate the way you're grappling with the budget, and that we've been kind of dismayed at the previous budgets that in the past few years that have been not controversial, but seem to have not kept up with the needs of our children. And so maybe that is part of the reason why this budget is such a big increase. But I think if we don't address these problems, are only going to get worse. And at the same time, while none of us likes to see our taxes go up, I think if we don't keep the schools, return the schools actually to a higher ranking, that will negatively affect our property values, and therefore we haven't really saved any money. Thanks.
Thank you. Going once. Great. So the next order of business is to do our new business. We will be doing our budget transfers. This is to transfer money from certain accounts to other accounts where we had unanticipated excesses and unanticipated needs.
Would you like me to make a motion?
Do you want to go over them, or do you just want to make a motion?
If you'd like to go over them again, we can. The majority
We don't need to, but we can just vote.
give a summary. The majority of the other teaching services that cover an additional expenses in teachers, and the $104,000 is from the administrative salaries line, moving it over to the insurance line, where we have seen an additional 15 individuals on our health insurance.
And that we didn't necessarily over budget in those, but we have not hired people that we had anticipated hiring for a whole host of reasons, or hired later, so that's why we saved that money. Yeah.
I move that the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School Committee approve the fiscal year 2020 operating budget expenses transfers of $296,112 from other teaching services to teachers. Also, $104,000 from administration to insurance, retirement, and other.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that? Anybody have questions? All right, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Great. So next thing is just an update on the superintendent search. That's, I just wanted to let people know that the screening committee has been notified, everybody's ready to go. They'll be trained next Monday. But that we should, at our next meeting, start setting up who's going to be going on what dates to visit, so that people can make the arrangements to have the amount of time off that they would need. Dorothy said that this is like a 9 to noon, 9 to 1 commitment, so you potentially could work a half day or something, possibly. But that would be sometime between the 12th of March and the 20th of March. So if people can just start looking at their schedules so that we could do that at our next meeting. And then during that same time period, we would also be having the candidates coming to visit us. So if we have 3 candidates, we'll have 3 nights of interviews. Maybe if we have 4 candidates, maybe we'll have 2 nights of long interviews. So we can probably use a Wednesday, but there will probably be an additional day in that week that has March 20th in it, because we are targeting a final decision on March 20th. So just be aware of that. There's no commitment during the day, but just in the evening. So, okay.
Michelle, how many school committee members usually attend?
She said we should have at least a pair. So if we could do a pair, and another pair, so that it isn't, and if one person wants to go to all of them, that would be awesome. But if, we can't all go, then if we could just, everybody could take a day. But if people know ahead of time that they can't, then we should try and figure out what we want to do about that. So if we want to look at people's calendars next time and just, write in, I'm going to take this day, and then Dorothy will have to schedule those days.
You can ask, just, if someone is not local, but not like across the country, like
Then-
if they're from like Connecticut or.
Yeah, so Connecticut, maybe we wouldn't go. Maybe we would do a Skype thing, or maybe we would do, some sort of
Got it.
Zoom or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
She did say at one point, some group she worked with did go to Las Vegas to see a superintendent, but I was like, I don't think that's what we're up for right now, so thanks very much. So. But if someone from Las Vegas is watching, feel free to apply. Applications are due by next Friday, so.
I was going to ask you when those would be.
They're due on the 21st. I did ask, 2 Fridays from now. I did ask Dorothy to, once it's been finalized, to tell us how many people applied, so that we have an idea. Do we have a pool of 30, or do we have a pool of 3? And because that may affect other actions that we would need to take at that time. So if we only had a pool of 3, then we would probably need to meet and discuss what we want to do about that. I don't anticipate that happening, but you never know. There's a lot of searches going on right now.
Right. You remind me again, I'm sorry. So the selection committee would be forwarding the recommendations, and those would be the ones that we would be visiting?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
And it's only supposed to be 3 to 5.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. Okay.
So, and if it's only 3, then we had booked 4 days, then
Right,
whoever
right.
picked the lucky day doesn't have to go.
Got it.
So,
Okay. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Do we want to discuss this paper packet thing now? That's next what's on the list. It says discuss paper packets. I'm not sure what that means.
So at our last meeting, we had talked about, how to be more conservative of our resources for environmental reasons, but also for cost reasons. And some of our school committee packets can be upwards of 300 pages, particularly when we're reviewing whole policy sections. And we weren't clear, I wasn't clear, at least at the last meeting, whether we were deciding to no longer do paper packets, or if we wanted to be polled each week, who needed a paper packet, who didn't. And so just so that we make sure we're doing the right thing, I wanted to have that discussion and know specifically what you all were looking for. Staff did take the time to cost out, just to give us a general sense of, well, what does it really cost to create a paper packet? Because, when they're small like they are this week, it doesn't seem very burdensome, but let's just say our average packet can be around 80 pages, and it's about 6 cents a page, so it doesn't seem like a lot, $4.80 a packet, but we typically print 10, because there's 10 of us here, and sometimes 11, depending if Thomas wants to take his packet or not. And so that increases that cost at almost, by another $15 or so. And then when you take into account the cost of toner to print it, we estimate that around $110, and then the maintenance on the copier machine to do it, and then the 2 to 3 hours, depending on the size, it can take for staff to put it all together. That's about $50 to $75. So we estimated a cost based on 7 school committee member packets per meeting at about $84.19. So just to put that in perspective as we're counting all of our dollars and cents, just another motivator for us to think about, could we begin to wean ourselves away from the concrete paper, or maybe only have certain things printed like the annotated agenda and critical supplemental materials that you would need on hand.
Yeah, because like the field trip things are super lengthy,
Right.
but we don't need to see necessarily all of that.
We can
We
read
could read
that
that
part
ahead.
online,
Yeah.
but there's certain things I know as a secretary to make motions, and it's really hard to go back and forth on an iPad.
Yeah.
For me, if I'm making a motion, so I'm not saying everybody might want what I need to read the motion to make sure I'm getting all the information, because it's
Yep.
hard to go back and forth. As far as policies, that's hard, but I agree right now, because we're going through to make our policies online. So we're coming through as a section at a time, and so that's like group of a lot of pages. And, I mean, if everybody does their due diligence, that's fine. I'm having, but at the same time, I don't know if we want to make, sometimes I'm one of those who has to go through and have it printed out to look at, just a first
Yep.
reading. I'm not saying for second reading.
I agree on that too.
And then what was the last thing? I guess that's it for right now, because I can't remember what I'm going to say, so somebody else can speak to what they think, if they find it relevant.
I'm fine with going with electronic and trying to reduce our paper costs and waste as much as possible. And your points are valid. It is hard to flip through and find where we are.
And not
But if-
everybody needs, you know, the packet, so I'm
Right.
just saying, at least for the secretary, at least
Yeah.
for me.
One
'cause
full printed packet.
You need it, but I don't need all the supplemental.
Okay.
And if we, like you're saying, do our due diligence beforehand and we're reading everything
Yeah.
the weekend before the meetings, we should be up to date. 'cause
And
we do
that's,
have our-
that's what I do, but,
packets.
so then either that, or I print it out and then start making all my notes and going through, so I can show where
So it's
they
being
are.
printed anyway, but
So
at your
it's being
house.
printed at my
At your
house.
cost, that's fine, great.
So that's kind of my issue. The other thing is just, you know, I have a little bit of issue. I guess I want to make sure minutes are printed up, because just so we know changes, at least for right now, till we get that under control.
Yeah, I feel like and me personally, because I don't always have paper with me, I need the agenda.
Yeah, definitely it seems as though the annotated agenda has been really helpful for us as a governing body to stay on track.
I totally agree.
And one of the things we were testing out is, do we want to put some of like the supplemental material, like in the case of budget transfers, we know what the motion's going to be, so we can provide that for you.
And at one point, we did have them in our packets, and
Yeah.
that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Like, just background, I wouldn't need the whole thing.
There were some issues with them
Right.
being written incorrectly, and so that's when we stopped, so.
So that's why we've gone back and forth. So I would be fine, then I take back what I said before, besides the minutes, until we get that
Okay.
organized. To have the supplemental within, and it doesn't need to be on everybody's, or it can be, I don't care. And then that way we can save
Okay.
paper.
So do we want a motion that we would do that, or do you feel like you have consensus?
I would prefer a motion.
Great.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee vote to modify our paper packets as discussed.
To
Second.
include what?
To include the agenda and supplemental information when we have to make a motion.
But only for you.
but only
In the minute?
for the secretary.
So,
Everybody else just have an agenda, maybe, or if they don't want an agenda, that's fine too.
I need an agenda to take notes.
yep. So it sounds like if we vote yes, what that will mean is everybody will get an agenda. Stacy will get a packet that includes stuff that might need a motion. She won't get the whole policies printed out for her. The only thing I'm still clear on is, are we all getting minutes or just in your big packet?
And then maybe just me minutes to make sure that we have it, and I could always hand them off to Michelle Horgan, since we have two Michelles,
To do what?
just till we get organized.
So everybody's getting minutes or just
No,
you?
just me.
Okay, so it sounds like when we vote yes, the motion is everybody gets a piece of paper, Stacy gets a full packet.
A modified packet.
Is that what
Yep.
you're hearing?
Yeah, I got it.
I
Okay.
read it all online before the meetings
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Additional discussion? Great. All those in favor? That's unanimous. So, great.
Thank you.
Now we're going on to an enrollment report, and I just wanted to just mention this to you. It's interesting information, but we haven't really ever got this.
Oh.
I know, so maybe after this meeting, we could discuss, or later in the meeting, we could decide if you really need to be pulling these numbers together or not. So,
Okay.
okay.
Well, they're always available on our website. I want to kind of turn that back on, but.
I know there was a question at the last meeting about this second one, but just this general enrollment. We
Yeah, I've
really
had-
only used to get in October,
Okay.
but I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying.
No.
If it's a big time waste.
It's not a
don't
big
do it.
time waste
Okay.
because we collect it monthly anyways,
Okay.
and we collect it monthly for all kinds of reasons.
Okay, great.
Budgetary reasons, we're always looking at class sizes and how enrollment numbers are shifting. We also have multiple reports we have to do monthly. Like right now, we are actively in the process of collecting our school choice, confirming, I should say, our school choice data. And right on our website, under the superintendent's tab, there's a tab called Reports that I'll show you here in a second. Because I know there's some people who think, oh, the enrollment's declining, and yes, that's true in some grades, but it's not true in all grades. And so I just think the more information folks have, the more clarity they can have. And so I'll pull it up real quick and I'll show folks how to navigate to it. So I'm here on our district page, and when you click on district information on this little tab, you get this whole menu. And down here, there's a tab that says superintendent, and then reports. And here's that enrollment report. And so you'll see us updating it right around the first of the month in live time. And what this does, and we're constantly adding to this and saying, is this the information people want to see? Is there better information that we could be showing? So one tab, this is this year's tab, 1920, and you can go through and literally see by grade how enrollment changes over time. So you can see our pre-K enrollment is increasing since August. We had 40 pre-K students. We currently have 50 as of February 1. You can see our overall district enrollment. This is by school, so we're looking here just at Winthrop. And then now's the time of year where we're starting to say, okay, well, our seniors are going to graduate, our 11th graders are going to bump up, our 8th graders are going to bump up, and so we're starting to look to see how our class size is going to change. But for the most part, we're pretty stable throughout the year. We don't have big attrition or churn throughout the school year, but there is some students who come and go. And so what this doesn't tell you is how many kids left and how many kids came. It just tells you the number, the bottom line number. But for those who are watching, you know, it's right here at your fingertips whenever you're curious and want to look. And then we just added a new tab at the bottom that is October 1 enrollment, and we're going back to October 15th. So again, this is, you know, is enrollment declining? Well, yeah, when we look at the high school, it is. But then when we look at the middle school, it's actually starting to increase. And then when we look at each of our elementary schools, here's Bucher. Again, I won't read the numbers to you, but you can see that numbers are increasing in our elementary grades. So just want to equip people with facts. I think facts are good.
I'm just going to say that this out district looks like it might imply out of district placement. So maybe the better term is choice in, or
This is out of district placement.
I think those are your choice in students.
You're right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So-
I can adjust that
Because
language.
there's no
This
out district in
page-
elementary here, yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
just because we don't want to send,
Yep.
because we're using that term a lot, we don't want people to be confused by the terminology, so.
Yes,
Because there
and-
aren't 69 students that have been outplaced at the high school. We have 69 students who don't live in Hamilton or Wenham attending our high school, so, yeah,
These are all choice in, right?
great. Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
All right.
And the cool thing about it is I'm updating it in real time, so anyone who's looking at it at home, like instantly, this spreadsheet is accurate when we notice that there's an error or a correction that needs to be made. The other thing, as I was saying, there was a question last week about the number of students that we may lose from 4th grade to 5th grade. And so when we look back from 5th grade to 6th grade.
Yeah.
And so when we looked back, this current year, I think we had 2 less students in 6th grade than we had in 5th grade. The year before that, there was about 10 less students, and then the year before that, there was about 20 less students. Again, it's not student for student, so that doesn't mean that 20 students left from 5th grade to 6th grade. It could be several students moving in and out. So we're going to take a deeper dive and really start to look at the individual student level to see if there's any trends.
I wasn't sure that was even correct.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
And so one of
but
the.
you were looking at June to September versus, right?
Yeah, let me just. I
Because
can-
my numbers were October of the previous fall to October of the next year. So your numbers could be different, but it seemed like a big difference, so.
And is the day you collect the data matters.
Yeah.
And so what'll be tricky about our preschool data, as you just saw when I showed you, the numbers have been increasing, but we didn't add that third preschool school till November. So when we look at October 1 numbers, we're going to want to remember a little asterisk on 2019, 2020, because that third class wasn't added until later. So we're trying to find new ways to represent the data, to make sure that we're answering the questions, but also that we're collecting the data in a really clean way so that when we need to retrieve it, we know that it's accurate. That's good. So I'll keep, that kind of goes with the choice in and choice out. Vinny can speak a little bit more specifically to what we're seeing in terms of trends of students choicing in and out. The one thing I will say about that is we verify this data multiple times in the year. So we did it back in the beginning of the school year, and now again, we're at the process of saying, okay, Amesbury Public Schools, how many of our kids do you have? How many of your kids do we have? And we do that with all of the schools in the area, while also verifying with what the state is saying about students choicing in and out, because there's a direct impact on funding and how we're budgeting. So I don't know if there's any questions about those two things. No?
Nope.
Okay.
Next, we're on to Hamilton Goes Green.
All right, so this is, we're still fleshing out, is this really going to be our brand? Are we going to call ourselves HW Goes Green? We've played around with ideas like a cleaner, greener HW, or we talked about HW Generals Go Green, so we're playing with some different names. What's exciting about this subcommittee that really is forming quite organically, basically we were notified by the town, as I said at our last meeting, that there was concerns about just the way we're managing our waste as a 2 towns, 1 community, the way that we're managing our compost and our recycling. And I talked with both the town manager in Hamilton and the town administrator in Wenham, and we collectively agreed that our students are the ones who are really going to help the adults make better choices and are really going to help us create change in a sustainable way. So we started to inventory what is our practice, and we got in touch with Danielle Pertucci, who's our K-12 wellness department chair or curriculum leader, and she brought some students from the Environmental Club and National Honor Society, and we just started brainstorming ideas, and very quickly we had more ideas than probably you could even imagine. And so now what we've been doing is trying to dial ourselves back and channel our energy in a more concerted way so that we actually have a multi-year strategic plan with a goal of becoming a zero waste school district, and looking at how we can empower and educate students from as young as pre-K all the way up through the high school grades to instill a composting and recycling program that is going to allow us to be better stewards of our environment, but also help us manage this problem that we're having across both towns. So lots of exciting energy. We have a parent who joined us last meeting. We have another meeting next week. And as our students, as you can imagine, our students are kind of like, it's our second meeting already, and we haven't done anything yet. And so they're challenging us to be bold and be courageous, and we're really hoping to start putting some tidbits out there on social media and throughout the schools and the towns, kind of like did you know types of things. We looked at our consumption. We've been surveying students, where the students have been surveying students, and we're looking for like a big two-town, one community kickoff right around Earth Day in April. So we'll keep updating you with that, and I imagine in probably March, the students will want to come and tell you for themselves what our plans are. But I know there's some buzz about that in the community, and folks are really paying attention and asking tough questions, as they should be, and we're really excited to put our students in sort of the leadership roles and helping us be better.
So Wenham is organizing a all-service day in May.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's some way to plug into that as well. It's being, Wenham Connects is the people who are organizing it, but
Okay.
I just know we're involved in doing something that day, so.
Do they have a set date yet, or is it?
Yeah, but I don't remember what it is, but I feel like it's the Saturday before Memorial Day, but it might be the Saturday before Memorial Day.
Oh, I hope
but
it is.
It's a Saturday in May.
Okay.
All right. The chair's not here today, so. But we should let you know that it's an exciting time of year because you can be a member of the school committee. All you have to do is go to the district offices, pick up some papers. Those are available during our regular business days. The last day you can do that is February 24th at 5 p.m. Once you do that, you go to your town clerk. They verify that you are who you say you are and that you live in town and register to vote. You collect 40 signatures from your friends in either town and return those papers. And then you can run for election to be on the school committee. So they're available now, regular days, 8 to 4.
Yep.
But the very last day, which is to pull them out, is Monday, they have to be returned by Monday, February 24th. By 5 o'clock. But if you pull them out at 8 a.m. and you go down to Crosby's, you can get them done by 5. It's not a problem. I know people who have done it, so. All right. We're on to committee reports. First is Capital Finance Planning Subcommittee, the FY21 budget refinement process. And there's an exhibit for that in your packet. Who's going to take that? Is it going to be?
Yep.
Okay.
So the subcommittee met last night to go over some additional proposals that we had earlier had asked Dr. Kuchenberger and the leadership team to come back with a model that would recognize some of the sort of budget implications of the towns and provide some options to the school committee. So last night we heard from Dr. Kuchenberger and what the leadership team's recommendations were. And what we have here tonight is a proposal, just to walk you through what we discussed. There is so I'll leave it there for now. So I do want to thank the leadership team for their thoughtful deliberations. I certainly was not there, but I know that this was a hard decision on their part. We appreciate the effort that they made and also the time and attention that they committed to providing this information back to the school committee. So what we have here is where we started off with. So on the screen is FY19 approved budget, the FY20 approved budget, and the FY20 proposed of the 32.9 million, right? And that, again, I'm focusing on the 21. That's what we have proposed, and if you all recall, That represented a 13% increase from prior year's budget. So I also want to remind folks that we are also recommending that we put forward a capital budget request of $958,000 for FY21. This includes security infrastructure improvements, some commitment for furniture, classroom furniture in some of the buildings. I can't see some of that stuff.
Replacing the middle school sidewalks,
Right.
the athletic campus.
There's an athletic committee, the athletic planning grant, planning proposal for $65,000. Anyways, sorry,
Technology infrastructure, too.
right.
Yep.
The details have been presented before, so,
Sorry, I need to go ahead too fast.
what's that?
I think I went ahead too fast.
Okay. So again, I just wanted, this slide really is to sort of recognize that we are putting forward a capital request of 958, made up of certain things. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so here's where we go to refining the budget. So I'll walk you through some of these things. So what we heard from the leadership team and through Dr. Kuchenberger is some recommendations for how to, for line item, either deferments or eliminations in certain budget requests, okay? So what we have here is a total $469,000 reduction in the budget for, in sort of salary and benefits. So what this means is, for example, in the first line, deferring 7.0 FTE kindergarten teaching assistants of $301,000. So if you remember, part of the tentative FY21 budget included 7 full-time kindergarten TAs, right? What we heard is that again, to try to meet budget considerations, we are deferring, not eliminating, but deferring that request. Okay, pushing it off into future years. It doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It doesn't address what we want to address, which is increasing and maintaining high student achievement. It just has the implication that we are not going to do that this year. Okay. Another item would be the full-time social worker would be deferred. Some part-time positions will be eliminated. That's the assistive technology, IT summer interns. We defer a full-time ESL teacher, defer the after-school program. Those deferments, again, were part of the part of the 21 tentative budget. Going down, we eliminate a truant officer stipend. There's some salary adjustments, that's an increase. We eliminate the College Bowl stipend in the middle school and reduce 1 team leader stipend in the middle school as well. So again, total salary benefits, $469. Again, going down to different categories, I won't go through the line by line, but again, the total impact here would be either deferment or reduction of spending in salaries and materials for a total of $69,000. I'm rounding. Reduction of contracted services of $46,000. Actually, if you go back, I do want to, so the contracted services, again, are services that we currently do not have in place right now, right? So it's a premium to go out to find those services, and as Dr. Kuchenberger had indicated before, we lose the flexibility of having those services at our disposal during the school day, right? So you're paying a premium when we don't have those services. So here we're not even bringing them in, and we're also reducing the amount of spending that we have, right? So again, I want to make sure that we're all clear about the implications of some of these things. We're going into the eyes wide open. Okay. Utilities. So Vinny was able to sort of recalc some of the estimated increases in utilities to bring it down by 61,000. It doesn't eliminate it, but it just reduces it by a different calculation formula. We would be reducing the total amount of spending on contracted services. Doesn't eliminate the need, just means that we would be trying to spend less. Do less.
Right.
Again, so
Less
total.
is less, not less is more.
Right. So total reduction here, $361,000. Student tuitions here, there's a combination of choice in and choice out, right? And so so this is a little bit of accounting kind of thing. The increase in FY21 student choice in is revenue into the district, right? But it's shown as I won't demonstrate the accounting, but because it's a little, but you basically want to net it, right? So net impact would be $64,000 here, reduction in spending from the budget. User fees and offsets. So I do want to point this out. We are suggesting that we increase the student user fees from 40% to 50%. That would reduce the district spending by $57,000. And then there's a Medicaid offset recalc, $30,000. That's a decrease in revenues, not an increase in spending. Decrease in revenues, net impact $27,000. So the total amount, taking all those reductions, does bring the FY21 proposed budget down by a little over $1 million. So remember, we started off at 32.9. We bring it down by 31.9. And then the percent change year over year, instead of 13, is 9.44%. Right? It's a pretty significant drop. I think it's meaningful. I think it's also painful. It doesn't eliminate the needs. We are pushing out some needs in the future. So I have to make sure I read this chart right. So the first three columns, so this is, if you remember, we are starting this year with a unbalanced budget. So if you look at the second column, FY20 approved, you would see that you recognize that number of 29 million. The FY20 reality, as Dr. Kuchenberger has suggested before and indicated before, the budget for FY20, if we factor in the additional kindergarten, the additional, all these other add-ons, or sorry, not add-ons, but all the other additional things that we had to do to start the fiscal year, the budget really would have been $30 million, $30,350,494, right? So the reason why this is important is because if you bring in the FY21 proposed budget of 31.929, it does make the year-over-year increase of 5.2%. Right, that's reality. So again, the FY20 brings in actual spending, actual things, not necessarily the budget, right? So there is a difference between obviously budget to actual. So the FY21 proposed budget, if we include all these spending reductions, makes the impact of 5.2% year over year. Before I jump off, I want to give Michelle Horgan, Stacy, Julie, Vinny, and anything I mischaracterized, anything you want to add, anything else you want to point out that I didn't?
No, I think you did a great job. The one thing I guess I want to note, because it was my questioning to even Julie, was why was the utilities at such a high cost? And really, Julie explained it, and maybe she can explain it differently, but year after year, we had been going over budget, and no one knew it. And she asked why we didn't, and I didn't know about it ahead of time because we would transfer one time a year in the summer, and we weren't given all that information. But when she showed us the budget book, you know, it's 2 different times. You don't think about it. When she showed me, I was like, oh, the numbers are there. She is trying to keep a realistic budget, and that's why, you know, we're at the 5% for our utilities, because we've always been going over budget, and I don't know by what percentage. And Julie can speak to that better. And so I just want to point that out, that, you know, when people look at the numbers, at first I was shocked at the first numbers that came out, and then it got refined to 5%. And then I said, well, even these numbers seem high compared to how the town's budget. And you said, realistically, we've been over budget every single year, and just we're moving money around to make it all work.
Yeah, so our original tentative budget projection was looking at a 3% increase on our highest year, looking at FY17 actuals, 18, 19 actuals, and 20 projected. And the adjustment that you see here in the refined budget is taking a different look at it, because our FY17 utilities were extremely high, so I'm just the high school numbers in my brain. And it was like 140,000, and then in FY18 it was like 110,000, and then in FY19 it was like 102, and those aren't specific numbers, but it was showing that kind of progression. And so our new director of facilities, being on the job just since September, was trying to say, how do we ensure that we're not in the red halfway through the year or at the end of year? And so his original recommendation was 3% over the highest year. And then when we recalculated and said, what if we went with a conservative 5%, knowing that it likely will come in under that, but at least we know we're going to be adequately budgeting for it, and only look at FY19 actual. And part of that is we did do some HVAC improvements, like in the FY16-17 timeframe. So it could be that we're just starting to see that return on investment, which is a good sign. And we're working with the town to better understand exactly how that investment is, how we're maximizing that return on investment. So we feel confident that this will give us adequate funding to make sure that our utility costs are covered, but does allow us to generate some reductions from the tentative reading to the final reading. Would you add to that? Or?
I just want to thank the leadership team and Julie and Vinny for working so hard on this budget, and to stress, and Jean did too, that this $1 million is not fluff that is taken out of the budget. It is, I don't want to say it's harmful, but it is, it's not helpful to our students. It's not layers of unnecessary things. Julie spoke about implementing programs that will help us down the road with special ed. Taking away the 7 TAs is a step backwards for us, but we understand that we need to do this just to have a budget that's feasible. So just keep that in mind, please. This was a lot of work, and it is damaging. It's not the best scenario for us, but we understand that we had to do this. So thank you to the leadership team and Julie and Vinny for doing this.
Absolutely.
So there is
Some good news.
some good news to say. So I won't, can I turn it to you?
Sure.
Because you have a better understanding of it.
Sure. I would just add to what Michelle Horgan is saying, in that there's a lot of things that are atypical about this year. And one of the questions that our community has been asking, as they should, is, what's the plan? Because these types of increases are not sustainable. And we fully understand that. And so for us, we're looking at this as a correction year. How do we right some of the accounts that we haven't been adequately funding, but also really starting from day one with the full leadership team to develop a needs-based budget and making sure that we're communicating, knowing that we can't have it all in one year, but making sure that the community really deeply understands what our needs are and what the implications are of delaying funding them or deferring them. So that's why we've tried to present it in a variety of different ways with a variety of different tools so that everyone is making a conscious decision along the way, and that you're gaining trust in us that we are doing our due diligence on our end of things. And so with that being said, one of the things that recently occurred this year, if you've been paying attention to the legislation process, is that a new law was passed, and the bill is called the Student Opportunity Act. And what this does is it allows for additional funding to be earmarked, if you will, for public schools across the Commonwealth. And as it should be, about 80% of the funds that were devoted to supporting the school districts will flow to 35 of the neediest districts in the state. And so long as our state continues to have an eye on equity and strives to close opportunity and achievement gaps, that's always going to be the case. But the good news is that every single district in the state is gaining in some way. There truly is an opportunity for all of the students in the state of Massachusetts. And the funding behind the Student Opportunity Act is just what it says. It's designed to help close those persistent opportunity and achievement gaps, and really looking at our collective work across the Commonwealth over the next decade. So it's critical that the resources that we are gaining from FY20 to FY21 are used for that purpose. And as a school district, we are going to be required to submit a student opportunity plan. And I did send this email, I apologize, to the school committee and the leadership team just at like 6:44, right before I came over, because I was at a session today with superintendents from across the state and some executive leadership from the Massachusetts Association of Superintendents, and was able to get some clarity on what exactly is going to be required for that plan, because it's a quick turnaround. It's a 3-year plan that will have to be approved by this committee in March so that we can submit it to the state by April 1. And one of the things we've been wondering about is how true is this number? So on January 20th, we received word that the governor's budget had passed, and we received what's called these cherry sheets. I don't know where the name comes from, but I would.
They used to be printed on red cherry
There you
paper,
go.
yeah.
I knew there had to be some historical context, but so this is our cherry sheet, and you can just Google this, and you can put in any district in the state. And so we wanted to show you what that looks like. So here you have FY20 cherry sheet estimates, and we're focusing specifically on Chapter 70 funds. There are some other aspects of the Student Opportunity Act. You probably heard about circuit breaker reimbursement for special education transportation. They're still fleshing out some of the details of that. But today I was given confidence that we could really use this FY21 governor's budget proposal, Chapter 70 number, to develop our budget. We were being really conservative, not knowing, what the plan was going to look like. We just received that on Monday. So, trying to make sure that could we meet the expectations of the plan? Will we be able to engage the community adequately within the short time frame, and then get school committee approval and submission and be able to submit it on time? And what I learned today, I think we're fully able to do that. And we already have some parent engagement meetings coming up, one on Friday with our Special Education Parent Advisory Council, one on Monday. There's a parent workshop about our strategic blueprints, and some other meetings that'll be coming up over the next month that I think will be adequate, including this right here. So long-winded explanation to say that the good news is, and here I can pass this if it's hard for you guys to see on the screen, we are looking at an estimated increase in our Chapter 70 funding over FY20 of $254,461. And so that means we have some choices, because right now the number that's in the budget was our FY20 actual, not knowing at the time that we presented the tentative budget what our estimate even would be, and then even yesterday not sure, can we really count on this number or not? One of the things I was told today is that this is the floor. There's still a lot of work being done in the House, and then there will be in the Senate and the conference committee before the final budget is approved, but we can count on this being the lowest amount of Chapter 70 funding that we would receive. That's obviously very exciting for us. That's about 1% of our budget, a little less than 1% of our budget. So when we start to think about what could that $254,000 mean for our FY21 budget? There's really three options, and there may be more than three options, but I'll just broadly categorize them for the sake of discussion tonight. The first option would be to simply increase our FY21 Chapter 70 revenue by that exact amount, which would result in a net percent change over the FY20 approved budget. And that would result in an 8.57% increase instead of that 9.44% increase that you see on this sheet from all of those reductions we just talked about, right? So remember, tentative, we started at a 13% net change over FY20. We worked really hard to get to 9.44%. This would get us almost a percent lower at 8.57%. That's one option. The other option would be to increase FY21 Chapter 70 revenue by that amount, $254,461, and also increase the FY21 expenditures by the exact same amount, maintaining the net change over FY20 as 9.44. And what this would do, I should back up and say, in option one, we'd still be required to submit that student opportunity plan, the 3-year plan, in the way that I was talking about earlier. It would still have to address the persistent opportunity and equity gaps within our district. And it would also have to meet the DESE requirements. And so there's like 17 recommendations of ways that you can commit to expending these funds. So no matter what option we choose, that has to be part of it. And some of those options include enhanced core instruction, like expanding access to full-day high-quality pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds, or implementing research-based early literacy programs in pre-kindergarten and early elementary grades. This is something we're already working really hard on with our data literacy team. So if we chose option one, we certainly would highlight all of those things that we're currently doing and how we plan to continue that in FY21. It could also include targeted supports for students, so increasing personnel services to support holistic student needs. So you saw in our unmet needs, that licensed social worker. That would be the holistic approach. That would be supporting the whole child. That could be something we could justify and choose to add into our budget. Again, if we stayed within the same amount as the revenue increase, it wouldn't change the refinements that we had worked on. It's still a large increase from one approved budget to the next, but it would allow us to develop a plan in a way that would truly supplement what the current FY21 tentative budget would allow us to do, or I should say the refined version. And then the third option is always the hybrid option. You do some combination of the two. Increase the expenditures to accomplish some of those things, or bring back some of those supports that are now in that unmet needs column, and also increase the Chapter 70 revenue. And so depending how we decided, if we decided to do that, then you're talking about a net change over the FY20 approved that would range from as low as the 8.57% if we chose to just increase revenue, to as high as the 9.44%, which is the current refined version. And then it could be some combination in between. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
So thank you, Julie.
I'm happy to answer any questions about what the evidence-based programs are or aren't, if there's
Yep.
any about that.
So I think what's still before the school committee is based on the revised budget that brings it down to 31.9 million, right? Which is basically this list. Directionally, is this where the school committee wants to go?
I'd like to understand what this reduced maintenance contracted services is. Like, what are we not going to be doing? I mean, that's a big chunk of this reduction, a quarter of it.
A lot of the preventative maintenance that Tom had planned on doing that we currently don't do.
Like,
So, for instance, we don't check our boilers for the heating system until they break. This would be getting somebody in there to
like a cleaning and a
fix it
checkup.
ahead of time,
Yep.
or just to maintain it.
Okay.
Or more maintenance to our fields and
Right.
cutting grass around all the buildings. A lot of those things don't get done right now and were put in there, but will remain not filled.
Okay. So it's not necessarily a reduction in services,
Current
the
service.
current services, but it's a reduction in what we had hoped we could do. Okay.
And one of the things we were trying to accomplish with this tentative maintenance budget proposal was getting to, as Vinnie said, more proactive preventative maintenance, but staying more on top of things as well. So you probably noticed that we didn't even do like our fall cleanup until the school year was started, because we only had well, I would say we only had enough money in the budget, but we're overspending lines in the budget just to do one spring or one fall cleanup. And so those are choices that we've had to make, and ideally, we'd be doing a spring and a fall cleanup, not just so that things look pristine and presentable and that we can all be proud of our schools, but because, as you all know, there's health implications to not cleaning up the leaves and things like that with ticks and other things, so.
May I ask a question? Yeah, am I good to go?
Yes, go ahead, Peter, sorry.
Reduce student services, contracted services, special ed. I imagine we're not violating any laws there.
No, this would allow us, because we have in our required services, remember, we're adding our own BCBA full-time equivalent position, and we're also trying to still fill that SLP, speech-language pathologist position. In FY20, we're contracting all those services out. If we're able to recruit and retain highly skilled professionals in those two areas, that will decrease what we've been spending, and so it actually is a net neutral investment and generates some cost savings.
Right, I remember you presented that, bringing it in-house.
Yeah, and it'll allow us to more than double service to students in terms of access to those skilled professionals.
Is this reduction in Medicaid due to the fact that we have more outplacements?
No, that's a reduction in the state reimbursing.
That's what I mean, is that because we have less to file with them because we
There's a couple
are sending kids
factors.
out of district more, or what is?
There's a couple factors that came into play, but most of it is the state got stricter on what we can actually claim for reimbursement, so we've seen a drop in
Okay. So it's
the amount coming in.
like a change in,
Processes and the way that we can classify certain services that we provide and what's submittable and what's not, and then also the actually time and effort it takes for our staff to properly submit the forms has been a challenge that we've been working through.
yeah, I know that was like, we didn't have it, then we put some things in place and it went up, but then maybe we need to look at that again. Okay. Does anybody else have questions they would like to ask?
Vinnie, I know we certified the E&D. Do we have any use that, do we have any thinking of use for that, any of that E&D?
So we are returning about 217,000, I think, in the 21 tentative budget. That's the amount over the 3% limit. That's all we currently plan on returning now.
I don't recall us ever spending that money. Do you have
I
any?
don't recall either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to if 3% is the right number, like, is 2% a better number? And, if this is really a correction year, can we, put in some this year, some the next year, and some the third year, so that we start to sort of bring it down a little? Do you know if MASBO has any sort of like recommendations, or
They usually recommend to keep it at the 5%, but
do you know how many districts maybe do?
do keep it at the 5?
I don't,
I don't know how many currently have it at the
yeah.
I know some
be an
districts are
interesting
even
thing
at
to know.
0, don't even have E&D.
What was that?
Yeah, there are some districts who don't have E&D because they have the D instead of the E. So they've spent it because they've had deficiencies that they had, which could be us if we didn't have the circuit breaker this year.
Correct.
Can you explain one more time? The money that we're going to spend to cover the additional cost this year is from circuit breaker. That is money that we were paid out, we paid last year, we put into the state, and the state has reimbursed us for this year?
Correct. They reimburse us in the current year for prior year
Yeah.
expenses.
So next year, we'll get money based on this year.
Correct.
And so is that is our spending of that in this budget, or is that spending of that going to be retained for future potential unknown district placements?
The spending of it is included in the FY '21 budget.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we're
Projecting.
Projecting, yes.
are projected,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
Conservative projection, but
Well.
yes.
okay.
And there is some changes that will occur in that. We just don't know exactly what they are.
And we don't know exactly what the reimbursement's gonna be yet, right?
Right.
The percentage, yeah.
Right. And so Vinnie's going actually to a workshop on Friday to see if we can glean some more insight. That's the tricky part about our budget timeline. And, you know, we all understand the timeline because we're a regional and the way that it nests into the two towns. But, I mean, last night we were here until, I don't know, 10-ish, right? Working on 9:58, working on the refinements, and then this morning at 8 o'clock, I learned something new, or 8:30, I learned something new, and so there's always kind of things in motion, and so I want our community to understand that we're always giving you the most current information based on what we know, and you want us to be conservative in those projections so that we don't end up in a situation like we are this year, where we're in a deficit from day one.
So I want to remind the committee that next week, we have to pass our final budget recommendation. So,
Our final ceiling.
right. So I want to make sure that if we need to give direction, additional guidance, we haven't talked about this yet, but I do want to get to that. But if we, for at least right now, not including the additional revenue here, are we, directionally, what do we want to give guidance to Julie and Vinnie to do? Are we okay with the 31.9? Do we want to go lower? There's significant implications to that.
Well,
So,
Jean, would it be helpful to look at sort of how that impacts the numbers when we talk about that? So like here's with the Chapter 70 increase, right? And you can see that impact it has on the bottom line. And then we really liked this form to help us assess what's approved versus what's reality. So you could see, again, with that increased Chapter 70 revenue, if we had the budget we're actually living, the percent change with that increased revenue would be about 4.4%, which I think is right well within range. Again, trying to just show that this isn't like a bloated budget. We're not being irresponsible. We just have some unique challenges this year.
yeah. I just want to kind of compartmentalize like the new revenue to this, because you know, it's easy for us to jump sort of say like what are our options to apply that, but like even doing this isn't going to get us the 7 kindergarten TAs. It's not going to give us a licensed social worker. You know, it's not going to get us a lot of other things. So I want to make sure that like this thing we can live with, or we can't live with it. Like I want to make sure that what the subcommittee is going to put forward next week is going to pass, and that we will then be able to sort of go out to the communities and advocate for that budget, right? Because we will need to be in lockstep as a full committee to advocate for this budget. So I want to get there, so.
So I feel like you're speaking
I
to
wanna
me
get there,
directly
David. I
here.
want to get there, David.
As I dropped Jean a quick note earlier, not sure at what time I was going to get here tonight. What's important to me is that we are sticking with our ideals as a school committee on what we have personally and as a committee in mind, what we want to do that's best for this district. What I brought up to Jean earlier, which is going to come off very negative, but that's okay, is that in year 1 of bringing a school resource officer in, we're already at what I called could be the possible worst-case scenario last year, right? I'm getting recommendations to cut teachers or cut the addition of teachers and licensed social worker while keeping the SRO on the budget. right? And last year I made it very clear that I was against hiring an SRO over a teacher and over a social worker. I think that our leadership team made very, very, very good case as to why these 8 positions are critical to the success of our district and to reducing future spending in special education costs down the line. So I have a hard time with those cuts. That's, and as I said in the very brief note to Jean earlier, that I will support the budget, but I have a hard time going up here and voting in favor of this because I'd be a hypocrite to do so, right? I still strongly feel that having the teachers, the proper teachers in place, the proper amount of teachers in place, right? We already know that we don't meet that requirement at the kindergarten level, right? That was made perfectly clear. And the addition of a licensed social worker, when multiple times at multiple levels, it was brought up the increasing needs of social emotional, needs of our students, right? And then we know that by not meeting those needs, whether it be in reading at the kindergarten level or social emotionally in the middle school and high school levels, that it will cost us more down the line, right? So while I know everyone at home is really psyched to see that 8.57 as a possibility, we have to make it perfectly clear that if we do that to try and keep all the other boards happy, that I don't feel that we're doing what our job, and I think that we're kicking problems down the road, right? And I think no matter what happens here, that has to be said, and I'm trying to say it sort of as succinctly as possible, right? I'm a taxpayer in this town, so I understand what the difference between an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13% is, right? I get that. But at the same time, I also understand that without major changes, that can only happen outside of this table, right? That's the other thing too, that a lot of our cost increase, right, can only be controlled at the state and national levels, right? How we're funding IDEA, how we're funding.
You should say what that is, because most people don't know what IDEA is.
So, and now, of course, you asked me, so it's
Well, it's special education.
right,
law.
so it's a special education cost, right? And how much money we're actually getting in reimbursement, or that's funding programs that isn't coming from our homeowner taxes, right? And then the same thing with healthcare costs, right? And that's something that we can't control, that voting on the national level hits you in the pocket personally in our homeowners taxes. That has to be made clear, right? So again, without doing that, it's up to us as a school committee to make sure that we're sticking with our ideals and what we put as our goals, and doing what's best. And so that was my thought process when I saw these numbers.
Go ahead, Dave. Thank you, Peter.
I agree wholeheartedly with what David just said. I was looking at this budget, and I was happy to see the numbers come down, and I was greatly appreciative of your hard work, but the part that I have the greatest difficulty is in voting for would be reducing or deferring teaching assistants, social workers, counselors. I agree with everything David just said. Before, I had my hand up, but no one saw it.
Sorry.
And I was about to say the exact same thing David was about to say.
So I think when you have more needs than resources, there's a series of bad choices that have to be made. And I don't mean bad choices to sound negative or alarmist, but this was really difficult for us as a leadership team, much like we went through and prioritized our priorities to give you that tentative budget recommendation. We did the inverse and prioritized reductions. And the SRO, the school resource officer, as a level service, but a new funding demand this year, given that it was this year funded by the Hamilton Police Department, and next, FY21, it becomes our responsibility. That was on the list initially, alongside all of these other things that we're deferring, and hands down, the leadership team said, we need to keep that position. They've seen the benefit of having the school resource officer. And I think for someone who's not in schools every day, it's hard to understand what the role of the school resource officer is and the value add. We are particularly lucky because we don't just have a school resource officer, we have an amazing school resource officer who has worked really hard to develop relationships with staff, with students, with families. And the way that we've been able to maximize our return on investment of the school day, let's say, from 8 to 3. I know school hours vary, but let's just use that as the time frame. Because when a family is in need, or when a student is struggling, or when there's a crisis in a family or with a student, he's able to connect in ways that school officials aren't. He has a different skill set that we don't have. And it's also, I could share many anecdotes with you from times when students have come to him to share, I think I made a bad choice, or I think I'm about to make a bad choice. And he's able to be that trusted ear and hear those things and help us react in a proactive way that we may not have been able to before. And so, I've said this before, but to me, what really was eye-opening was when we were having one of our ALICE trainings, which is our emergency response training. This is the first year we're training our students, and we had the high school auditorium was full of freshmen and maybe sophomores, and the school resource officer, Kent Richards, along with the high school principal, Eric Tracy, were doing the presentation. And when Eric Tracy made a comment of, that's why we have Officer Richards here, the whole entire auditorium burst out in cheers, and students were literally standing up and applauding. And so I think what's hard for us to understand, because we didn't go to school in this environment, is the stress and the anxiety that our students feel about their own safety every day. That's not something we had to manage or negotiate when we were in school in the way that our kids do today. And it's not that one school resource officer across 5 schools is making the schools any safer, but he is a resource and an ally, and our principals are often talking to him at night. He's often informing us of family situations that happen that we may never know about, so that when a student comes in the next day, we're there to wrap our arms around that student, literally and figuratively, and make sure that they're getting the supports that they need. So it's hard because you don't want to say what's more important, because each of these things, when we put all the pieces together, are what complete the puzzle and allow us to truly educate the whole child in the best possible way. So I just wanted you all to understand that that was something that we deliberated as a leadership team, and it's kind of like the service and you have versus the one we don't have yet. And so that was part of the decision-making for that. But I know for a fact that the leadership team would be very happy for us to move the needle further if that was something that we thought the community could support.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Tom, but is there anything you want to add to this discussion?
Not specifically, but I
Okay.
do think there is value in Officer Richards just as like a presence in the school. Even as you said, maybe he doesn't necessarily make it a safer place when there's 5 schools and 1 officer, but it's nice to have him there, I guess. But at the same time, it is hard to decide, is he worth cutting a possible teacher? I don't know. That's the impossible question, I guess. And is there a right answer? Probably not.
Right.
There's just
Right.
a less bad answer.
Well said.
There's going to be a couple open chairs in April that.
Yeah, but he's going to hopefully be off somewhere.
It's also interesting to note again is about the SRO, that to remind people that we will also be, if this stays in the budget, depending, is Bucher will be included now.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't before.
Right.
And also interesting, I don't know, but I could be off and it may not be appropriate, but there was also talk that we would be given a year notice of non-payment for the SRO possibly, but I don't know where it stands.
We did receive that notification back
A
in
year?
December. Right on, the MOU said that we would be notified by December, and we were
So
right on
then-
time.
So then they would pay for half the year then, or no?
No,
They got it in on time.
Okay.
yeah.
So one of the questions, I had that same question about cutting those positions, and I don't know the school resource officer here. I do know other places, and that role is often filled by social workers, right? And the thing is that the school resource officers can't, it doesn't work the other way. So that social workers are also supporting kids with major mental health problems, kids that are suicidal, kids that have, teenagers that are, you're looking at the onset of bipolar disorder and different trauma things. And, which seems important,
I agree. I agree. So one thing that we, as a committee, need to be reminded is we can recommend how they spend the money, but ultimately it's the leadership team's decision on whether they hire certain groups, right? I mean, we could say our preference is for you to hire whatever, an assistive technology person, but ultimately it's your decision to decide what the best use of resources are.
Well, you get to set the budget, and then we
Right,
get
but
to
from there you
ensure.
get to allocate it to
We
make
get
sure
to
it's-
ensure
yeah.
the schools are run well.
Right, so we
Or
want to
we
keep.
actually run the schools, you ensure they're run
Right.
well.
So we just want to keep that in mind, that, ultimately, it doesn't matter which position we think is the most important. We'll set the budget, and then they'll pick what they think it is. And then we can evaluate whether or not that was the right decision. So but I kind of agree with you, Ty, that
Yeah, I mean-
if I were picking between an SRO and a social worker, I probably would pick the social worker. But that's my
So
thing.
I think I just want to say, I feel, I don't mean to be sort of turning this into like a personal attack against the SRO, which is not intended to do, right? It's really, what I'm trying to clarify more is how difficult a decision this really is, right? And to sort of bring it back to the slide that's in front of us, is we have this opportunity here that wasn't here 24 hours ago. And how do we want to view this? And how do we want to move forward? Now, I know there's some people in this room that say 8.5, just go home. But we have made great sacrifices here, and due to the hard work by the, capital subcommittee and the leadership team to, really, I hate this term, but sharpen their pencils and get this budget down. But, we're all sitting here talking about sort of this need, and there is a little wiggle room all of a sudden. And, I think maybe option 3 is the way to go, and say, hey, let's split the difference a little. Maybe we can do, get a little bit of this back and really be able to feel comfortable, right? Because I think that's, I don't feel comfortable cutting these, these positions. I don't feel comfortable cutting any of it, honestly, because I know even the delayed maintenance costs. And I know these schools very well, and how much that hurts too. But I just think of, I have a student, I have a child that, I have a couple kids that use the school social workers quite often, everybody from Rocco loves walking down and popping in and he'll talk to anyone though, but, you know, and I know the importance of that, and I'm sure that when he gets to meet Officer Richards, that he will spend a lot of time talking to him as well. But, you know, we do have an opportunity to sort of not be as drastic in cutting and really kind of sticking to what we feel is right. You know, it's like if you were to sort of take away, and I know we can't do this, but if you were to take away the dollar amounts and look at these cuts, are you okay with that?
So I'm personally okay with this list. I'm not happy about some of them. I would suggest that we consider for this reduced maintenance contracted services, that those are possibly, I mean, there are things that we should be doing on a regular basis, but there's things that maybe we'd need to do once. So they're kind of a one-time cost thing that we wouldn't necessarily need to fund year over year over year over year, and that would be an appropriate use of our E&D funds in order for us to be sure that we're getting on track with that. And I also think that it's a week, so we shouldn't tie your hands by saying we have to do option one. Like, you probably need an opportunity to think about, do I need $30,000 in order to really put forward the opportunity grant, well, not grant, but funding plan? But I would like to see us get closer to 8.5 than to 9.5, essentially. You know, using E&D won't allow us to reduce the amount of money we spend, but it will allow us to get the things that we need. So,
I would tend to agree. As being on the working group, that I've been fighting for the lower budget. I know we need these things. I don't necessarily agree what's here. I'm just looking dollars and cents, and I just think, you know, I don't think we should be locked into these options quite yet, because I still feel that even though I know we have to make a decision on the budget, I think we need to be cautious, because we don't have a final budget. Probably, if you think about it, might not be till July. And there's some things that might be brewing, you know, that might come up unexpectedly, and so we need to be careful of what's in our budget, because it keeps happening to our schools year after year. And we're faced with really hard decisions on how to find the money, like we did this last year, and starting off in a deficit this year.
and then this is one thing I would just like to say. I've sat in those chairs when there have been 4 and 5 rows deep, and those seats have been filled with people who have come and advocated for an override, and we have had a pitiful, pitiful support for a high budget like this. So if you are at home or you have friends, you need to get them here, because if we're going to be courageous and bring this budget forward, we need to know that you're going to be courageous and support us. And the way we will know that is that you will come and you will email. And you will have to come to a town meeting, and you will have to sit through that meeting for 3 hours if this is what you want. Because if I'm going to put my reputation on the line, I need everyone else to be there as well. And for me to be courageous and say that this is what we need, and to have 4 people sitting in the audience is really, really disconcerting. Particularly when I know there are a lot of people sitting out there saying this budget is too high. So I don't mean to be wagging my finger at you, but I am, because I'm putting my reputation on the line, and people are not even able to come down here to tell us what they want. So I really recommend that this room have 5 rows of seats next week, and people have themselves here to tell us that they want us to be courageous.
I want to add that our working group, Michelle Horgan, Jean Lee, and I, have spent hours at our working group meetings. You don't see us on camera, but we were there, like Julie said, till 10 o'clock last night. You know, we've been at these meetings that people don't realize that we're spending extra time. Again, we, our committee, we're volunteers spending hours on this budget. And, you know, and then it's hard to watch even like the Facebook back and forth comments. Like, come to our committee meetings.
Gene Lee,
And-
just get rid of Facebook.
You know, it's just.
Best thing I ever did.
It's really hard, you know, one way or another. I may be advocating one way or another, but at least I have an opinion. And instead of hiding behind, you know, like a social media or whatnot, come let us know. Because if we're gonna advocate and go to a town meeting, and then we show up, there's certain, you know,
And
we
it
as school
fails.
committee, and I've been on the school committee, you know, over 6 years. And I can say, like at last town meeting in my town, it was very hard to look around because I go year after year and see the lack of parents at the town meetings. But they want this budget and they want the high, you know, high number district but they don't come. They're like, well, can't I just put my word in? I have plans. I'm sorry, that sounds really kind of snarky, but it's really hard, you know, it's really hard.
So I am not at all happy about where the level of the budget has come out. I will support a budget that comes forward between the 8.75 and the 9.44%. And I hope that when you come back next week that you have, you know, some idea of how much of that funding you're going to need in order to really do what you're supposed to do to meet the intent of the money. And I know our district, we still have gaps that we need to address, but they're not necessarily as wide of gaps, and that we do have the opportunity to do some things with this money. But again, we need to know that people are going to support this, because if they do not support this, and we go to a town meeting and it's voted down, we're going to have to come up with another budget that's going to cut even more. And that will be even more devastating than this list that's in front of us. And that is a painful process because it happens during the summer when you're on vacation. And we don't have air conditioning in these buildings, and you're sitting in that gym and it's 100 degrees. So I really, really strongly recommend people are marking April 4th on their calendar.
Yeah, how many people were at that meeting? I know I had my child
not good.
was very young, not even in school yet.
And it's hot.
I was at that meeting, and not many people can say, you know, the parents then were at that meeting, but I can't say, a lot of those parents, their kids have now all graduated, and so they're really not, their skin's, they don't have skin in the game, and so it's other parents now who have to show up for that.
So,
So I'm going to try to move on. So I
I was going
appreciate
to.
everybody's comments. It helps us for sure. So to let everybody know, the subcommittee is meeting again on the 11th, a day before the final budget will be presented to the full committee for the final vote. We will, I think we've heard that we're going to take option 3 to be able to tap into some of this additional newly found revenue to pull back some of the deferred or eliminated costs. I also want to let the full committee know that we are going to try to schedule another joint meeting with the select boards and FinComs sometime during the last week of February. This is
The-
after, what's
yeah,
that?
what's the idea behind that?
Well, I think if we're going to have an override, we need to negotiate how that's
Yeah,
going
it's
to
to
look.
coordinate
Last joint meeting, they asked.
coordinate town meeting, warrants, presentation a little bit, because it's,
They want
you
to
know,
coordinate.
yeah.
Yeah, because I'm digging this, 2 towns, 1 community, we should all be on the same page
Yeah.
about how it's presented financially.
Not arguing,
Exactly.
just ask
Yeah.
what
Yeah, yeah,
what the
yeah.
thought process was.
Yeah, no, it was, we had decided, we thought last night that it was a good idea to try to do one other joint meeting, again, because it gives it, obviously, next week, we will pass it. Is there another public hearing? No.
Yes.
No, there is public hearing.
At
Okay,
6:30.
public hearing next, the 12th.
And there should be 5 rows of seats filled with people coming to tell us how they feel about this budget.
Right.
6:30?
at 6:30.
Right here.
Oh, you just
Because
made
we
me
will
really
be
mad.
voting in a budget, so if we're not seeing people, that's gonna be a problem.
The one thing I would just add as we kind of close out this portion of the agenda is that when it comes to most budgets, or I think we could probably say all budgets, it's hard to create a budget that everybody's going to love and support. And so what we've really been trying to share is what this budget allows us to do, because even though you might feel passionately about something that's an unmet need, every budget allows us to make incremental improvements if we're really strategic with our resources. And I have 100% confidence in this leadership team and our teaching staff and our support staff that this budget, whether it be 9.44% or 8.57%, will increase over FY20 approved, will serve our students well. And we will do everything we can. We will do whatever it takes to help every student reach their own unique potential with the resources that we have. So really looking closely at the budget from now until next Wednesday and finding what is that thing that you want to ensure stays in the budget, because as Michelle Bailey was saying, that if we're not able to pass the budget at this level or this range that we're talking about, then we have to come back and make further reductions. And that thing you're really passionate about are those things or those services or those programs that you're really passionate about may not be sustainable.
So, I'm going to use that as a segue. I just want to sort of, say that I know, without just sort of throwing it back at you, without sort of, I think that, the only sort of direction I can give you without saying, move in X and take out Y, is that I just think that whatever movement you make in this next week, just think about what we want as a school board, right? And I'm not saying that you didn't at that point, going into this, but like, I just feel like just telling you to go back to the drawing board without any sort of direction is just the wrong thing to do. But, where is there an opportunity to take $100,000 of this and put something in place that will decrease costs down the line, or won't be increase in costs down the line, right?
Yep.
And that's sort of the best direction I can give you. Looking at this, I think there is room for that. And I think that at that point, right, to sort of segue into the marketing of this budget, it would be really easy. It'll be a lot easier for us to stand up and really defend that budget, because, being able to look at that, like, yeah, we made some tough cuts, and then we went back to the drawing board, and we heard, and then we decided to add this because down the line we did, we feel that it'll do this. And that's going to get us a lot of leverage moving into April. So.
Jean, do you feel like you have direction, or do you want some sort of motion?
No, I think we have direction. I don't think there's anything to act on for a motion tonight.
Okay.
So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Policy Subcommittee. I know the protocols are on here because the Policy Subcommittee is supposed to be doing something, but we have not met due to my inability to participate. Hopefully that is coming to an end, and I will be, well, at least feeling good enough to get out and about, so. Did you want to add something about, one thing that I have noticed when looking at the data is that there's room for improvement. And so maybe that's something that we can spend the summer working on, is how can we sort of pull that together to improve? Yeah.
I'm almost a little sad that we haven't continued to keep collecting the data,
Yeah, me
because I
too.
feel like there's been a lot of improvement in just the operations and the governance. So maybe we'll collect a couple more data points. Or You're doing a good job. And so is that
and then-
Wednesday or Tuesday?
I think it's Monday.
The 10th?
This is the date,
That's Tuesday.
then it's Tuesday.
Okay.
So it's
Just a typo in the agenda.
Yeah, policy will be meeting on Tuesday. The 11th, okay, yep. So,
well, I'll have to figure out something for that, so that's great. Negotiation Subcommittee, do we need to provide an update, or do we just want
Just-
people to know?
Well, just that we met yesterday to set a plan in motion to start reviewing our upcoming contracts. And so when they are set to be renegotiated, well informed and ready to cross the aisle.
Right.
And our next meeting is Tuesday, March 3rd.
So we have reached the part of the agenda that is called the consent agenda. There's a number of things that are listed, and instead of voting on them individually, we will vote on them as a group. Is there anything, does anybody want to remove any of these items? Okay, maybe we can have a motion
I
then.
move that the Hamilton Wyndham Regional School Committee approve the consent agenda as stated.
A second?
All those in favor? That is unanimous, all 7. The next agenda item is topics for future meetings.
Do we have a meeting the last week of February?
Well, it looks like that's probably going to be this
No.
joint one.
That's it.
What were you thinking?
That there's a few of you guys sitting here that really needs a break. Well-deserved.
It's
Right.
coming in March.
So
April 5th, dude. No, not because not because that's the last
Yeah,
No, but that's
okay,
it.
duty, but April 5th is the day after town meeting.
Yes.
yeah.
Like,
Pedal to
it's
the metal.
pedal to the metal
Yep.
until April 4th, dude. It's like, it has to,
We're fine.
Do you want to try and schedule that now, just because maybe we want it to be on a Wednesday, but maybe the rest of the people who want to come aren't available on the Wednesday?
to do what?
The joint.
That joint
We
meeting.
put out 2 dates.
We put out the 25th and the 26th. I know the 25th does not work, so both town manager and town administrator, we're going to connect with their elected bodies to see if the 26th might work.
Okay. Is that the Wednesday then, or is that the Thursday?
That's a Wednesday.
I'd just like to know how, as a school committee, we deal with emails we receive from our people, the people in our towns. You know, we all received an email from Bill Tyak at the end of January, asking some questions, and I know as a board, individually, we cannot respond to him, because I don't represent the board, but he does deserve answers, so how do we go about addressing the emails? And I'm sure we're going to get more from people. So having, you know, I know when Marty Cook sent an email, we did respond to him. So I'm just curious as to how we address this issue.
We had, in the past, we've done it several different ways.
It depends.
One, it depends. It's been the secretary, it's been the chair, and it's also been the communications group.
Okay, so should we put that on the agenda item for the next meeting?
Yeah.
Just to, because
Of
it's,
how to respond.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
I agree.
people need to be, we need to respond to them. And I know it's time-consuming, and we have a lot going
Yeah.
on, but
And also, you may get an email that's like, oh, I'm having difficulty navigating blah, 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 whatever it is. Who do I contact? To me, that's something, just respond.
Right.
But if it's something that's like, I wanted to bring to your attention that there is an employee, then that's definitely just forward to the superintendent, no response. You know, I have an idea. You know, we could even make a practice of reading those kinds as part of the comments. You know, so be forewarned that if you email us with an idea, maybe we'll read it. I mean, I don't know, that's something we should discuss. I think it's a good idea.
I did respond saying thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a
I
good
think
idea.
that's- Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, we'll even have music.
Okay.
Okay, protocol for emails.
I think also too, maybe, and I don't know if we did this last night, but add, you know, the communicating of the budget. What's our plan?
Super talked about.
So one thing I was actually,
Add to
Oh,
our
yeah, we
agenda
have to add that.
next meeting.
but I do have some thoughts.
And-
It's on there.
It's on there for
Yeah,
So
the.
I just want to verify, and then also, Julie, just to remind you, because I don't know if you knew this, but to talk to National Honor Society, to contact them for babysitting for our town meetings. They do
Oh.
that every year.
Okay.
Before I forget, sorry, this,
you are in charge of the babysitting, just so you know.
You're babysitting for 7 hours.
My
It's
favorite
in the
thing to
job
do.
description.
Wouldn't be my
But they
toughest day.
have done it, and it's a fantastic thing. It allows, first of all, the kids of the town to know that it's a special day, and it also allows the parents the freedom to go and know that their kids are in a good place. And they're with their friends, so it's super fun. Cool. And they've never lost one or anything. It's good. It's usually at the rec
Small
center, so
court.
it's like in a gym, and they've got, a movie playing, and they've got games, so it's good. Awesome, yeah,
I will get on
Thank
top
you.
of that.
thank you.
We do, because our meeting is next week, we do have a draft agenda going. So there will be approval of the user fee changes, approval of adopting the final budget, discussing the get out the vote strategy. Also, our director of maintenance, facility, and operations will be here to talk about the SOI process, the statement of interest process.
Yep.
So we need your approval for that submittal.
Are we approving the thing, or we're approving a process?
Just that he may be able to have a draft to you by Friday for your packet, but that he'll at least come and talk about our strategy, and then you have to approve for him, give him the authority to submit, and then you'll see it again before it's actually submitted.
Okay, so we're not, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. Anything else on that?
Then just the regular committee reports. So,
right.
yep, so far.
Anybody else?
I move
Yay,
we
wait.
adjourn it.
So next week, Stacy and I were just talking, big news flash, there is going to be cookies for all the people in the audience. So if, Stacy and I will definitely bring some. If you would like to also contribute, a dozen cookies, feel free to bring them. Okay.
Budget brownies?
You have to let people
Budget
know
brownies.
how good of a baker you are.
They're going to be really small.
If you're a bad baker, then.
Well, then buy them. Oreos are always appreciated.
They're going to be infused.
So then I won't say I used to be a baker.
Yeah, Stacy's a good baker, trust me. Okay.
I move that we adjourn at 8:41.
Second.
All those in favor?
I just haven't been able to make
Thank
a
you.
motion in 2 years.